Hi everyone, welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's Monday night. We're asking that question. We ask every single Monday night, what's going on? It's Halloween, you scary bastards. And one person that was particularly scared was Unai Emery after the weekend. Mark, what's going on with you, pal?
Yeah, I'm sure I saw a clip somewhere of a plane very hurriedly turning around midair on its way from Spain. So yeah, that's if you want a good horror show, it was Aston Villa's defence on Saturday.
Oh, mate, absolutely. That was fucking scary. If I was an Aston Villa fan, never mind. You could watch the entire Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street series and you'd see nothing anywhere close to as scary as Tyrone Mings up against Callum Wilson, mate, for those poor bastards, I'll tell you what. Especially that second half. Fuck me, Dev. But this is the crack show that we always have on a Monday, so we don't talk too much about the game. We'll save that for the Wednesday. We'll be back with the lads on Wednesday forevermore. But tonight we thought we'd do something a bit special, Mark, didn't we? Because it's a Halloween special. So we're going to do our top 10 scary Toon moments. And as I said, you know, talking about Halloween, we're certainly getting plenty of tricks and treats at the minute from Eddie Howe's mags and the new regime, and it's all sweet as chocolate, isn't it, mate? To be honest with you at the moment. But going back to the past, it's never been that way. Always, we've had some fucking frightening moments as Newcastle fans over the years, and we bashed together a horrendous list of 10 scary moments. And obviously we're live tonight, guys, as always. There's a couple you've already in the comments. Ash is in the house. Good evening to you, buddy. Ian's in the house. Yeah, we're both very well. Starting to get vertical from up here, like absolutely. So we are flying high in the minute, but it wasn't always that way, as we said. So we're going to get stuck in, Mark, in these scary moments right now, aren't we? So we're kicking off at number 10, which is if I get my keys right, we're kicking off at number 10. So the top 10 or number 10 entry of the scariest moments in Newcastle United's history recently is the unbelievable headline, Mark. I'm going to pass this over to you just to try and explain to me how in the fuck this happened in modern day football. So there was a guy at Newcastle United, as you'll remember, in the Mike Ashley era. A lot of this list is dominated by the Mike Ashley era, but it was called Tony Jimenez. I think was he a bouncer or some shit like that, Mark? He wasn't even a proper football guy, was he? This guy, Tony Jimenez.
Do you know I've scratched that part from my memory. I genuinely can't remember. I'm not sure. I'm not sure any of them had anything to do with football in the end, did they? And he was. I mean, the unbelievable decision to, well, reportedly not back a potential transfer for Luka Modric by saying that. You know, he was too lightweight. He was good, but he wasn't good enough. He's not going to make it in the Premier League. Oh Christ!
But this was back, if you remember, 2008. Kevin Keegan had come back as manager. He got us playing decent football the season before. They said they'd give him the summer transfer window, get his own players and everything else. He tied up apparently 3 players. He tied up right for Newcastle United. One was Sami Hyypiä, one was Bastian Schweinsteiger. And the other one was Luka Modric from Dynamo Zagreb, where he played at a particular time. And the story goes, Mark, that Luka Modric was in the fucking Quayside in the Vermont or something with his agent ready to sign after talking to Keegan. And this fucking Cockney wank Jimenez and Dennis Wise, between the two of them, went, nah, he's shite. As you said, he's too much of a fan. He's lightweight, everything else. And before you know it, he hopped on a train down to London, signed for Spurs. Fast forward to the last couple of years, and he's a fucking Ballon d'Or winner. So that's going to be up there as one of the scariest moments I've ever seen as a Newcastle fan, mate.
I think that there's an element of doubt over the full story, isn't it? I think Modric came out and said he wasn't aware of that, so I'm not sure whether he was there, whether it was his agent was there, but certainly there must have been a discussion at some point. It was in Keegan's book, wasn't it, that he'd said that.
It was, and he said it loads of times in talkings and that. He's talked about the story.
Exactly. Jimenez had said, come in and said, look, can I have a word? I'm not sure he's good enough. No, it's not something we're going to pursue. And then he goes off to Spurs, is an absolute superstar, ends up at Madrid, like you say, Ballon d'Or winner. I mean, what more can you say? That's about the worst bit of transfer business you can you can kind of come up with. I think that's other than maybe signing Marcelino, which was another one. It nearly made it onto the list, to be honest with you.
The man with the marshmallow thumb. Oh yes, we all remember Marcelino. What a player! What a player he was, mate. He can't hit your ride either. Never mind defend. Fucking dreadful. But as I said, guys, we are live, and I can see a few in the comments having a bit of crack with each other. If there's any moments that you think deserve to be on the list that we haven't mentioned, just feel free to fire them in, and we'll pull them up kind of as we go on. So that was number 10, Mark. Number 9, sweet Jesus. I mean, these are some of the greatest, frights of the past, aren't they? Really, we're talking about this man. Yes, if you forgot, this man did manage Newcastle United. Joe Kinnear. He hadn't had a job for 4 years before he rocked up at Newcastle United after Keegan had walked out, if memory serves. The second time around after they fucked him over, Ashley and his cronies. Now, Joe Kinnear manages for a total of 18 games. He won 4, drew 8, lost 6, which gave him a grand total of a 22% win ratio. Absolutely superb manager, wasn't he? He did have a heart attack, which obviously wasn't good for Joe, and he had to take a big break from the game. But he left us some memorable moments, Mark, did, including the infamous Charles and Zogbia moment. And Johan Kabay, I think, was
Johan Kebabs. Was it TalkSport interview, wasn't it? It was just a train crash.
Train wreck.
I still, to this day, I just remember, and I know the joke did its round, and I know I put it in that joke in here. I genuinely thought it was a piss tape.
It really was.
Genuinely thought it was a piss tape when it was announced. I think, that's really funny. Joe Kinnear, great. Move on. Who's it going to be? Really? Oh no, wait, that's actually happened. What are you? It's
like Asher said. How did it actually happen? It's a weird fever dream.
You do wake up out with just some horrible disease and end up thinking, "Oh, what have I woken up to? What's going on? Am I having some sort of weird delusion or something?" Honestly,
it was frightening, wasn't it? I mean, that was the season, was it not? Was that the season or the season before, where we had like 4 managers, didn't we? In the space of a year, we had Keegan, we had Kinnear, we had Houghton as caretaker, then we had Shearer, I think, as well, that took us down, I think, in the end. I'm sure that was the season, or was that the season before? I'll possibly get my dates wrong, but I mean, I'm just trying to
quickly I'm quickly just doing a little bit of research after the fact. Joe Kinnear was so September, so it was Houghton. Keegan left in the September, Houghton took over, Kinnear then departed in the April, which Houghton then took over again, and then Shearer took over at the end of that season. So
and then we went down. It was the season of 4 managers, and as Tommy says, Joe Kinnear more swearing than I do in a press conference.
Didn't think that was possible.
I was going to say, at least my swearing's got a bit of context to it, Tommy, mate, to be fair, But oh god, I remember. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. That is a very honourable mention as well, Luke. He's not made the list, but we have done a whole episode on this guy. If you haven't checked it out, it's up there. Signing Michael Owen was supposed to be a treat. It turned out it was a trick. And he was something that rhymed with that, mate. A stupid little prick as well, wasn't he? So I can't believe we signed that also. And that was definitely a frightening moment that I think Roger's on board with you, mate. He's giving you a well-deserved round of applause. Michael Owen, awful signing. Check our video on me if you haven't. It's Wish We'd Never. And we dive into that signing with Michael Owen. Absolutely horrendous he was. But yeah, joking here. I'm saying it myself, joking here, just a dinosaur from a bygone era. Sadly, it wasn't the first dinosaur we had in the St. James's Park, which turned into Jurassic Park. But at that particular time, fucking hell, just scary, Mark. Absolutely frightening. It just made no sense at all. But
it kind of summed up the whole Mike Ashley era, didn't it?
Statement.
Just the appointments and things. It just absolutely just summed him up to a T of just not knowing what he was doing. Like you said, he hadn't had a job in 4 years since he left Forest, I think it was. So, and he'd only been there a season, I think, in total, maybe. I'm not even sure he lasted a year at Forest. So it's not like he was coming off the back of having a good job and he'd done really well. He'd been poor. He had his time at Wimbledon and stuff, and then it just honestly, like I say, totally summed up the Ashley era, and it was just horrendous.
and frightening, and well deserves his place on this list. A good comment by Stu there. That was the summer we refused to pay for Modric, and we got Cisco instead. And Jimmy's giving
Ben
another
Affrey.
joke in here, special Ben Affrey.
Yeah,
Fucking hell,
I've forgotten about that one.
Oh, mate. Carver's a good shout as well. He's not made my list. I think I gave Carver a mercy pass, I think, to be fair. We swept up with a couple of shit managers. Joe Kinnear is the first one. There'll be no prizes to guessing who the second one is. But Joe Kinnear has definitely made the list just because the total what the fuckness about it, I think, is probably the best way to describe it, because it was just the most horrendous thing I've ever seen. And yeah, that's a good mention as well, Roger. Dennis fucking unwise, 100%. He's just a very small man, as Deck would say. But I can't believe he was at our club as well. He fucking just, honestly, some of these frights we've had, Mark, in the past is just give you goosebumps.
I was going to come back to that Cisco one because there was an argument from, I think it might have been from Wise or from Jimenez, that said that, well, they signed Cisco and they signed, who was the other one, Gonzalez? But they only signed them because they brought it was part of the deal to bring in the likes of Colaccini, and it might have been Gutierrez as well. So they had to sign them, because if they hadn't signed them, they wouldn't have got the other two. And they try to, well, look, we've got these two. These two turned out great. Yeah, but you've spent a whole lot of money on nothing. You've watched the best part of 5 minutes worth of YouTube videos on these guys and gone, yeah, they look all right. We'll bring them in as well, rather than try and negotiate a deal that didn't involve you spending $5 million on a player that, let's face it, was nowhere near good enough to have ever been near the team. So
I'm pretty sure that Cisco was just Spanish for Chris Wood, to be fair, mate. I think that's the translation. If you put it into Google, that might be what comes up. But moving on from the list, this is again our top 10 scariest moments. Do you know what? I've got to say, when this happened, I was absolutely mortified when this happened. I really was. I remember seeing, obviously, when we come back off the championship, Carroll, number 9 shirt, he was an absolute beast, wasn't he, Mark? He was unplayable in that first kind of 11-12 game spell in the league. You know, he got a hat-trick against Villa, I think, didn't he, the opening game of the season, and he just went on from there. He was scoring against all types of teams, Arsenal, Chelsea's, they just couldn't handle him. And, you know, I remember him doing this interview on Sky Sports before one of the games, and he just signed an extension, I think, to the contract, which is why Andy Carroll is one of the reasons I say contracts aren't worth the paper they're printed on, because he signed an extension. And I remember the guy talking to him and said, you know, what's the plan, Andy? What's the goal? And he said, I want to be like Shearer. I want to be here and break Shearer's record. I want to do this. And I was just swelling with pride, you know, thinking, oh, this is incredible. We've got a proper number 9 and another Shearer on my hands. And then this happened, you know, on transfer deadline day of all fucking days, Mark. I couldn't believe it. Helicopters, nightmares. Oh my God. Take me back, mate. Take me back to this scary day.
It's an odd one, wasn't it? Because, you know, we come off the back of a really good season in the championship. I mean, he scored, did he get 15 or 16 goals in that season?
He did, yeah.
Maybe he's got more than that. Comes into the Premier League in that half a season, has a better than a 1-2 record. I think he got 11 in 18 or 19 games. That's that half a season before he moved on.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. He totally ruined his career by doing it, because he never got above double figures in the league again. No. Those 2 seasons, that one in the Championship and one in the Premier League, were the only seasons that he ever hit double figures in the league. And it was just, again, it smacked of an Ashley era decision. You know, sell as high as you can get as much money for it, promise the world in terms of reinvestment or whatever, and just never deliver on anything. That money just never existed for Newcastle at all. It was an awful decision. I mean, it was an awful decision all round, because you're looking at an awful decision from him for going, because he was never really going to fit into Liverpool's way of playing. It was an awful decision for Newcastle. For I get, if you were going to
we were geared up to play through him. The whole team was geared up to play through him. Yeah, it made no sense.
That 10-11, I guess when you look on beyond it, you bring in the likes of Bar and Cisse and stuff, and I suppose it gets a little bit better. But you were totally geared to play with Carroll, and by selling him and not replacing him with anybody that was anywhere close to as confident in that role, it was just a complete. I'm struggling to find the word. It's just a deranged decision to have done it. It was only done for one reason, and that was to have made as much money as possible. I'm getting attacked by the cat.
Christ, he's making an early appearance, mate. 16 minutes.
I know. He's walking. It's witch. Halloween. It's witching hour. He's gone absolutely bonkers.
That's a great comment by Tommy. To be fair, I don't think Stevie Taylor was sad to see him go, but absolutely not after getting his jaw broke by the big lad. But I don't think I think the bars were sad to see him go though, because he used to go and absolutely drink his own body weight, didn't he? In shots and Jaeger bombs and all sorts of shit in the town. But, as a fan base, I think we loved that, to be fair. I spoke to loads of lads that said, they were sitting in the Gallagher or the Leasers watching them score a winner, and then they were watching them fall off a bar stool about 7 hours later, So to me, that's class. That's a throwback back to the days where footballers were a bit more like human beings. Just to answer your question there, to coin a phrase, yes, we're going to go back to pre-Ashley time. We have got some in the list here that is pre-Ashley time, but if you've got any suggestions, mate, chuck them in there. But when we finish the list, we'll bang a few honourable mentions up as we're doing along the way as well. But yeah, selling Carroll was mental for me. And it took us ages to recover, as you say, Mark. It's not until, we really got Barring that we started to even vaguely recover. I do laugh because that was the year, if you remember, Jordan Henderson went to Liverpool as well for 25 million. And I made a joke that Kenny Dalglish put more money into the Northeast than the local authorities did that year because between them two, there was like 60 odd million quid or something. But obviously two very different careers, 100%. But so I'm just laughing at Ash's comment there. Yes, I do think Andy Carroll would have failed the no dickhead policy, I think.
Massively.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. But to be fair, when he was at it, bang at it, he was unbelievable. Do you remember though? Was it when he had to go live with Nolan because he was getting in a bother, and then somebody burnt his car out? And was it Darris Hall? Somebody went and burnt his car out. He was parked in Nolan's driveway or something, and these wrong'uns burnt his car out or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that whole story about how Nolan took him in basically just to keep him on the straight and narrow, wasn't it? Just to try and sort him out. But I mean, he wasn't when you come, especially when you come back around him, you brought him back, and it was just not. He wasn't the same player. He was broken at that point. It was no point. I mean, he was paying on a pay-as-you play, wasn't it? Sort of deal.
He must have squeaked. He must have squeaked when he ran. Old Andy Carroll, then, like a knackered bike, just like ee, as he ran along there. So Jimmy's come out with another corky here. Jimmy, you smash out more one-liners than a night out in the 80s. You do, mate. Absolutely superb. I knew we'd sell Carroll at Christmas. Unbelievable. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So yeah, it was spit it out. What, the cat or just the sentence? So yeah, I think that was a horrendous move. It's certainly a nightmare for a lot of Newcastle fans. And as Ash rightly says, a nightmare for Carroll, really. I think if you would ask Andy Carroll when his career ends, which I'm sure will be any year now, I'm sure he'll pop up on the circuit and he'll go on podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And I bet you when he's asked when he's retired, he will say, yeah, I really wish I hadn't left Newcastle. I wish I'd stayed. I could have. I think if Carroll had stayed, I think he would have got over 100 goals for us easy. I think he would have etched himself into that, that kind of echelons of top goal scorers. I wonder whether Carroll and Lewis Suarez keep in touch. Maybe they'll go out for a little cheeky bite somewhere, Stu. See, I can do it as well, Jimmy. We've got Peter's in the house. How you doing, Peter? Good to see you, mate. Yeah, so I think, the Carroll deal definitely deserves to be on this list as scary moments. But this one next, mate, was a brilliant one. I'm going to let you in the driving seat for this one. This was one of the most frightening moments, I think, in any football club to see this happen. But for Newcastle United to see this happen on a football pitch was fucking unreal, mate. Tell us a little bit about this one, making the scary moment on the list, Dyer versus Bowyer.
Fitting the week it is, isn't it, as well?
It was, mate. Just the same fixture. Yeah.
Just one of the most bizarre incidents I've ever seen. I mean, you can give me your Cantona incident, I'm trying to think of other ones. Pardew's headbutt. There's all sorts that go in the list of mad things to see. But to see two players,
could have done 40. Couldn't have 40 scary moments.
Honestly, you have two players that are highly talented that end up ripping the shirt off each other's back. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it stemmed from, was it Dyer not passing the ball or Bowyer not passing the ball to Dyer, and
I think so. And he called him a prick, didn't he? Called him a prick or something. But did you not hear the story? I heard the story was it was over a girl. I heard it was over a girl. I don't know if that was true or not. Tell us in the comments if anybody remembers.
Of all the places to take it out on each other in the middle of St James's Park. I
think it was something to do because Dyer was a bit of a serial fanny rat, wasn't he? He was getting himself into all sorts of, I think he had more holes than Tiger Woods, I think, when he was up in Newcastle, to be fair, didn't he? You know what I mean? But he got himself in some real trouble, did Dyer, I think, with the ladies. We used to see him in Baja. I didn't remember we used to go on Monday night, see him pissed up in Baja, him and Genus and the rest of them. But I heard they were shagging the same bird. It might be bollocks, but they were shagging the same bird, apparently. And that's how it all kicked off. And then, they were giving each other shit and train or whatever, and everyone didn't think anything of it. And then, obviously, in the game, he wouldn't pass, and he called him a prick, and then set him off. You know what I mean? And off they went. So I don't know if that's true.
I was going to say, it's the one picture of Gareth Barry that he wishes it was never taken on a football pitch, because you look at him. Is it Steve Carr the other side? And you just
embarrassing.
What on earth are you doing? And it's embarrassing to them. It's embarrassing for the rest of the team, for the fans, for the manager. It was just horrendous. It was Souness at the time, wasn't it? That was the gaffer, because he hauled them out in front of the press afterwards, and it was just. I mean, they should have
shake hands,
strung up outside St James's Park, because
to be fair, I'd have loved to be in a dressing room when Souness had them in there, because Souness is a fucking maniac as well. Didn't he say he'd fight the pair of them? He said, "I'll fucking fight the pair of them," or something like that. Oh, hang on a minute. Peter's got the explanation here. So he said he didn't pass to Bowyer because he was shit. He wasn't wrong, to be fair. I thought Bowyer was shit when he was at Newcastle, to be fair, but you still don't do it, do you?
No, and like I say, I mean, it's just a massively embarrassing moment for everybody, and it says something whenever that fixture comes up. It's the one image. You can go with any win. I mean, look at the results that Newcastle have over Villa at St James's Park, but they're all forgotten because the one image that comes up every time is those two idiots fighting.
If you'll fight with your screen there by the looks of the Mark, I mean, Dyer and Bowyer. Mark's screen wouldn't work for him because he's shit, so he started.
It's haunted.
It's haunted. Happy Halloween and everything else. But I remember seeing Shearer's face in that, and just Shearer's utter disgust and contempt for these fucking dickheads, as Tommy said in the comments there. 100% that these guys could be the antithesis of the dickhead policy, mate. You're absolutely right. But Shearer's face, he was just absolutely fucking sick as a chip when he was looking around thinking, like, I've gone from playing with Rob Lee and Gary Speed to these two fucking wankers, like, what is going on? He just had that look about him, and oh god, horrible time. I mean, somebody mentioned Souness before in the comments there. He hasn't made the list, but I mean, you could throw him into this. The whole Souness era was a nightmare, and this probably just typified it, Mark, didn't it? Really, not being able to control your players and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think when you've got someone, I mean, just have the control over it. If there's stuff like that going on, you've got to have dealt with this before game. You either drop them both, or you pull one of them out, and it's just. You're absolutely right. Losing control of the players, losing control of the squad in the end, wasn't it? And it's just it sort of typified Souness. There he goes.
There's Lee Bowyer.
Have my own fight with you.
I'm just reading that comment there that Peter's saying they still hate each other. Do you know? I'm not a big fan of Dyer, to be honest with you. The way that Dyer went on, I think with the whole Bobby Robson scenario, I just don't think that, for me, made Dyer look very good. I've lost Mark there. I think the cat's knocked the wire out. We'll just keep cracking on until he comes back. I think that whole thing with Dyer just not playing on the wing for Bobby and everything else, just automatically made him look like a prick, didn't it? And just I think this just kind of got worse and worse and worse, and the whole thing with Bowyer as well, and just absolute bloody nightmare. We've got BT in the house. Good to see you, BT. And Ash is saying, "There's me, Mara." He's knacked the link. Ash, he's dove off there. I think Mark's going to throw the cat out the window in the piss and rain, I think. So we'll move on to the next section just as Mark is sorting his cat out there. And I think a big shout out to you, Ian. You mentioned this just before. The next nightmare on the list. You're right, mate. It was this moment right here, dropping Alan Shearer for the Dyer and Bowyer derby by Spider Heed himself. Ruud Gullit was just one of the most stupid, ridiculous, frightening moments, really, as Newcastle United fans. You can see Big Dunk there as well, either side of him. So as everybody knows, when that game was played, we lost 2-1 to the Mackhams in the piss and rain, actually very similar to the weather that's just kicked on in the northeast now. Was it Kevin Phillips, I think, scored the second goal, and Gullit went to blame. Mark's back in the house. There he is. Typical black cats, he's saying. Typical black cats. I just got into the bit about dropping Shearer. I just kind of started getting into it there. That obviously Gullit blamed losing the derby on Ferguson and Shearer, even though he benched the pair of them. I mean, in terms of a nightmare moment, a scary moment, Mark. I mean, dropping your talisman, and his strike partner, who between the pair of them, I think made every single centre half pairing in the league shit themselves before the game even kicked off. And you've got your biggest game. His job was edging on that game. If he had won that game, he probably would have kept his job. But he tried to make a point and drop Alan Shearer, and it backfired on him massively, mate, didn't it?
Yeah, completely. He's since apologised, hasn't he? He came out later on and said, he was a sort of young manager, and he was, trying to sort of stamp his authority, but doing it in the wrong way. But just you a player like Shearer, and it kind of reminded us. We had this sort of conversation with somebody on Twitter the other day about the whole Ronaldo thing. Yeah, about putting Ronaldo on the bench, and he's saying, well, you wouldn't do it to Alan Shearer. Well, you would, and I think a 38-year-old Alan Shearer would quite happily have sat on the bench.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
not
at that point in time,
what was he then?
No,
was he
exactly.
28, 29 or something like that? Prime of his career?
That sort of era, it was totally different. He was prime Shearer. He may not have been the same Shearer that was the early sort of years for Newcastle and at Blackburn, but he was still deadly. He wasn't right at the end of his career at that point, and it was a manager that sort of tried to throw his weight around, and it was completely right, Roger. Managerial suicide, especially in Newcastle, especially for somebody like Shearer, when you are the soul of the club, aren't you? You are that hometown hero that's come back and scored an absolute bucket load of goals, and there's the one player you just don't do that to. You could have done it to anybody else. You don't do it to him.
Absolutely not. We've got the Lynchman in the house in the comments. Good to see the Lynchman again there. Yeah, there he is. But yeah, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall again. When Shearer said he got up, he dropped the kids off early. I'm going to go and get him, and then I come in and Dr. Ferguson's already booted the door off the hinges, wanting to tear that spider clean off his heed. Could you imagine Ruud Gullit in the morning and hearing that booming Scottish voice? He would have fucking shit himself, wouldn't he? To be fair, mate. So. Yeah, it's just something you don't do, really, isn't it? To be honest with you. So BT's in the comments there saying Gullit left the club second bottom in Premier League with just 1 point from possible 15. Gullit blamed media intrusion as well as poor results. It's interesting. This rings a bell for a certain manager we have now, BT, doesn't it? But if you remember, Bobby came in, performed the miracle mark, and he got Shearer back up and running again, didn't he, mate? And firing, and just the rest was history.
Yeah, I mean, just could come back to you just hit the nail on the head with the guy that comes in, and what a man to come in and steady the ship and take it on again. And if ever you want somebody to come in at that point, he was perfect. And a legend in himself already at that point. He's just that whole thing, it was just. It's another one of those ones that just etched in everybody's minds, like the Dyer thing. Whenever you come, there's just that image of him sat on the bench is just there, and it's there forever, and it's just one you don't forget.
Absolutely. Rodgers bang on. The first game that Bobby had in charge, 8-0, Shearer got 5. Yeah. So that just shows you what a good manager can do for players, just like what Eddie Howe's doing right now. And to coin a phrase was saying, of course, that led to come in number 37, Rob Lee being given a squad number again. I love that story. If we could ever get Rob Lee on the podcast one day, hopefully we can. We've had Warren Barton on before, so you never know. But I'd love to just get him to regale us that story where Stuart Pearce used to play the passes short in training so they could fucking clatter. Hullet. No, it was Rob Lee, didn't he? Rob Lee played the passes short in training so Pearce could clatter Ruud Hullet. I'd love to hear that story from Rob Lee. It'd be absolutely superb, mate. Because if ever a manager deserved to get kicked, it was Ruud Hullet.
I mean, I never advocate violence, but that was probably worth a 2-footer in training, wasn't it?
Oh, mate. Yeah, but great player though. Shit manager. That was
unbelievable player.
Absolutely. Yeah, BT's right. Steve Clark, Atkins caretaker manager. He did. And then because he was obviously Hullet's man, wasn't he? And then obviously he went on to manage Scotland. He's doing decent things at the minute. Steve Clark. To be fair, Steve Clark, I think Steve Clark was a decent coach. And I think he's managed to escape being tarnished by the Ruud Hullet brush, I think.
Yeah.
Steve Clark, because he kind of covered himself in a bit of class, didn't he, mate? As Hullet exited the door and everything else. We've got Cesare in the house, even to you too, Cesare. Now, we are going to go on to number 5 now, but just before we do, this is a little shout out to somebody earlier on in the comments. I think it was Tommy. You're right, Tommy. It is time. It is time for Breaking Bacon, my friend, because in at number 5 with a bang is everybody's favorite worst nightmare. It is Steve Bruce. Of course, he was going to make the list. So the top 10 Newcastle United
nightmares. It should be broken bacon now.
It should be broken bacon.
Broken bacon.
Right. You're absolutely right, mate. But I mean, in terms of a nightmare, I mean, my God, we've spoke about him so much, and I know we probably shouldn't. We should probably move on from it. You know what I mean? But yeah, Tommy probably likes that in the comments. So we probably shouldn't move on from it. But this is a nightmare episode. This is a scary episode. So appointing Steve Bruce in the first place, Mark. He was a failed Premier League manager, probably a failed Championship manager at this point. He was at Sheffield Wednesday, weirdly enough, at a club that, they treated him really well. They gave him compassionate leave when his parents passed away, or one of his parents passed away. And he did the dirty on them like he did at so many other clubs to come and take his dream job at Newcastle. But his dream job turned into our nightmare, mate. Let's just have a little reminiscent about this man and why he deserves to be number 5th, so high on our top 10 scary list.
Well, I think we can put it down to kind of a number, which is a 28.9 win percentage. Is just
still better than Joe.
Well, that is true. I mean, to think he managed, what was it? Did he manage 100 games in total?
Oh, God, yeah.
For Newcastle, and it was certainly that's a league record. I think it was 28.9. It was only just slightly worse than his record at Sunderland. It was far better than his record then was when he went on to West Brom. But he was just just a dinosaur. You touched on it before about dinosaurs at the club. He's the epitome of it. A guy that hasn't changed with the way that football is moved on in the last 20 years. His branded type of management would have worked at one point. We saw it work at Birmingham and Hull for a time, but football moved on, and he didn't move with the times, and he just always looked bewildered, on the side of the pitch, much like that.
State of him. Look at the state of him, honestly.
Just that was his resting face, wasn't it? He didn't know what to do. He's just
resting
his lack of ability.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, wasn't it?
Yeah, the lack of ability to coach a side. I think famously he said that he didn't believe in tactics. Well, that's not how the modern game works. So you can play blood and thunder football all you want, but it doesn't work anymore. You know,
No.
that style of football went out of fashion, like I say, 20 years ago. So it's not going to work. And he would just refusal to kind of get with the times. And I think it's all become just a way of making it, almost just a way of making a payday now for him. It's just like that's all it's become.
Hopefully he never comes back into the game. But Stu's right. We did go on 20-odd game without a win under Steve Bruce. It was a horrendous run. And Ash is saying there's like Lauren Hardy, but he wasn't funny. And Roger's saying, well, he did give the players the day off, which is why they like him. You know, you look at his ex-players in the media, your Robbie Savages, your Chris Suttons, who argued, vividly with Newcastle fans on phone-ins. You know, even guys who ran podcasts like Alex of True Faith and all that. They're arguing with him about how Steve Bruce was a good manager, and when people like Alex were saying, well, no. Look at the stats. We haven't won a game in fucking 20 games, and they still weren't buying it. But I think even they've gone quiet now. But all you've got to do is look at how good Eddie Howe. Exactly, yeah. She's a family man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think all you got to do is look what Eddie Howe's done with his players that he said he couldn't get a tune out of. And Eddie Howe's turned them into world beaters. Joe Linton, Mickey Almiron, right now, Emil Kraft, these players that were shite under Steve Bruce, that are top 4 Premier League players now. That's what a good manager can do. Very similar to what Bobby did when old Spider Heat went doing the drain. This is what a good manager can do with the players that they've got at their disposal, because they look at a player and they see their strengths, they see their weaknesses, they see how they can improve them. Eddie Howe's done that, and our best players now were players he didn't even buy. And that tells you what a good manager can do. But I think with the Bruce thing, Mark, just before you come back in, the bit that was the scariest thing for Bruce to me was the arrogance that he had.
Yeah.
The disdain, the way he spoke about Newcastle fans, histrionics, hysterics and all this stuff. Just speaking of us like we're absolute morons, like we didn't know anything about the game. And you just thought, you arrogant, stupid, broken-nosed bastard. Like, who the fuck are you talking to? Like it was honestly, it was the closest I've been to vomiting on my shoes listening to a manager talk. It really was. Just what a prick he was, man.
It was the same before. It's been the same after. You roll out the same words in press conferences about the fans becoming like sensationalist about stuff, and we had the same lines were rolled out when he was at Sunderland, Villa. Yeah. Villa. Again afterwards at West Brom.
Wigan, you name it. Yeah, West Brom, exactly.
Didn't come out. It was always the fans have turned. Oh well, there's always a few. No, Steve, they turned because your brand of football stinks. Your team's shit. You do it. You're not getting results on the field. What do you expect? Your team comes out and is knackered after 60 minutes because they're so unfit, because they can't match.
Because you give them Friday afternoon off.
But I mean, there was stories that he was giving teams 2 or 3 days off a week so he could go away, or he could go back home for a few days. He didn't coach. He didn't know how to, and you've seen the difference. You bring in a good coach, somebody that can take players and improve them. And Eddie Howe is not a big name coach. When he came in, he did very, very well at Bournemouth. It didn't work from when he moved on, and he went back and it worked again. It started to go wrong, but then you look at the size of the club that he's at. It was always going to have a ceiling. He's gone into a club with players that he can improve, that have the ability to improve themselves while they listen to a coach that they respect. And you listed a few players there. There's a whole list of them out there. You've got Almiron, Longstaff, Shelvey, Shaw, Kraft. I'd argue Murphy as well. Now you're starting to see a tune from. All of those players have improved massively in the last 12 months under Eddie Howe. If you kept them playing for Bruce, they would be playing League Two football regularly within a season, because they would just have the life trained out of them. There's a reason why
he is. Matty Longstaff is playing League Two football now because of that.
Exactly, and there's a reason why we call it being Bruced. because he just has that effect on players no matter where he is. He's done it at every single club, and promising players that have come along have just had the football life sucked out of them.
But
which is quite apt for a Halloween special, isn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. The football vampire. I've on to suck your quality. It's basically what it is out of any single player. But I think the big thing that separates Eddie Howe to Bruce for me is the humility, the class, the respect that Eddie Howe has got for the players, for the fans, for everything. You know, Bruce didn't have any of that. He was so fucking arrogant. You would have thought he'd won the treble in every season that he'd managed, you know, and you're just like, mate, you're an absolute fraud. You know, Stu's saying that even Gerrard didn't get as much cover from the media as Bruce did. Honestly, it was shocking. I remember listening to one thing on TalkSport, right? And it was Freddie Flintoff. And I love Freddie Flintoff as a character and all that, right? But he turned around and his argument, I swear to God, Mark, his argument was, I think Newcastle fans need to lay off Steve Bruce a bit, because one time when I was in Dubai, I bought a round of drinks and my card didn't work, but Brucey got the round for us. So he's a good guy. And I'm sitting thinking, I'm in the car thinking, am I fucking listening to this? Is this a professional take on why we should keep this wanker who hasn't won a game in 20 games as manager because he paid your round, Freddie Flintoff? I thought, get fucked. I changed the station like that. I really did. And, you know, if TalkSport want a review as to how shit they are as a station, there's one right there. Unbelievable, man.
It just, yeah. I mean, when you're looking at the managerial ability of a manager by the fact that he can buy somebody a beer. That tells you about it. And I'm sorry, Freddie. I love Freddie Flintoff for what he did playing cricket and that, but that's just the most ridiculous thing in the world. And he was a stain on the club massively, and he's been a stain on many clubs. So
yeah, absolutely.
Let's hope we've seen the back of him for once.
Yeah. Let's hope football has been Daz Ultra and there'll be no more stains from Steve Bruce on any of the white sheets of football clubs up and down the country. So, yeah, Roger said the baggy stank doesn't apologise for not listening to us where we said it would happen. And it did, absolutely. BT saying there that Bruce's contract was leaked, making it impossible for him to remain at Sheffield Wednesday. Newcastle denied any wrongdoing. I mean, that was the craziest part, that we actually we poached Steve Bruce. That was the scariest part. And again, that was down to somebody who very well might make this list a bit further up, guys. But so I suppose moving on to the next one here. So I've got an honourable mention here to coin a phrase. This could have easily made the list. Ended up with 100-year-old Ian Rush up front. All the firepower that Dalglish offloaded. So it was John Bonds that was about 8 stone overweight, and then it was Ian Rush who was like 106, wasn't it? And that was brutal. It was like walking football, wasn't it? Remember Newcastle trying to play with that team, mate? That was scary. I mean, that was.
If you're signing those two in their prime, hell,
mate, no phenomenal
problem. Yeah. But Ian Rush was about 15 years too late, and John Bonds was yeah. I think you're right. At the time, was totally unfit. He'd still got flashes of brilliance in him, but he just couldn't get up and down the pitch anymore, could he? And it was just,
he couldn't get up and down out of his bed. He was that fucking old, John Bonds, at that particular point, mate. He had a kite on him bigger than Alfred Hitchcock, mate, when he stood to the side like he was about to introduce a movie. Fucking terrible. But yeah, I mean, fuck. But John Bonds, to be fair, he did score a couple of goals for us because he still had that raw ability. But yeah, fucking terrible days, mate. Good shout to coin the phrase. But moving on to the next one, number 4 on our list. To be honest, Mark, I think this is the moment where you can pinpoint everything going wrong, really, with the modern day Newcastle United. The day that we sacked this wonderful man right here, Sir Bobby Robson, God rest his soul. I mean, for finishing 5th, Mark, of all things, for finishing 5th, Bobby Robson was sacked. You know, before I let you jump in, mate, it was perceived that Bobby Robson was losing the dressing room and these young lads running riot. Dyer refusing to play in the wing, as I mentioned before. Dyer's forever a wank for me in that instant, that moment, right? Everything that he did for the club, his ability and all that, I forgot all about it. And even when he was crying when Bobby died, you know what I mean? I know he was sad. I thought, no, fuck you, Dyer. I really did. I know I shouldn't have done, but I did. Because I just thought you were the reason that we sacked the guy. You were one of the biggest reasons we sacked that guy. Because you and your other little brat mates acting the way you were, disrespecting, you know, one of football's greatest men, greatest managers we had. We should have put him upstairs in the boardroom and got somebody else in, you know, to manage the club. Maybe he could have helped coach them or whatever it could have been, Mark. But I think that was the sliding door moment right there where everything just went to shit. I don't know about you, mate.
I mean, I guess you're not really wrong, are you? Because you come off the back of that season, you finished fifth, and then it all started tumbling downhill. I mean, you get the takeover a couple of years later, and we'll come to that, but that was the start of the decline. Once Bobby went, and God love the man. I mean, I adore Bobby. Just an absolute.
That smile, man. That smile when he was here, man. He just loved every second of being here, didn't he, man?
Any football fan, you will not find a football fan in any country that doesn't know the name, and you won't find a football fan across England that doesn't love him. He was hated in the 80s. He was absolutely vilified in the 80s when he was manager of England,
which was terrible, by the way.
But he stuck to his task, and to be fair, England were awful at times at that point, but he stuck to his task. He built a phenomenal side that went into 1990. Arguably, we should have won. We're a hair's breadth away from sort of winning that game, and if you take us into the final against a depleted Argentina side, I'm absolutely positive we would have won that. We're a penalty shootout away. We're just a couple of inches away from taking that one on. But he was loved after that for the work that he did at Ipswich, for the work that he did as a PSV.
Barca, Porto, you name it, they all love him.
Universally loved, and it's rare you get that for Brighton. I mean, even when you look at somebody like Keegan, there are parts of Keegan was hated in certain
he was
avenues.
Yeah, but the thing of Ferguson actually said that Bobby Robson was the best British manager of his generation, and he really did. He couldn't say a bad word about Bobby. Some of the love in the comments as well. Asher saying he's filling up, thinking about him. What a legend, what a man.
Genuinely, I do. Whenever I think about him, because where I used to work, we used to come across him and Elsie quite a lot. They used to travel using GNER, who I worked for at the time, and you would get stories from the staff about, well, I've had such and such on board. They're a bit of a diva, they're a bit of this, bit of that. Everybody to a T it was Bobby. When they got on, they were lovely. They would have time to talk to anybody. Everything was, he tried to do anything for them. It was always too much trouble for. They didn't want any fuss. It was all they were just genuinely just the nicest people. And he is just, it's still upsetting because he's just loved. And it is, and he never, you know what I mean. It's so long since he managed England. It's so long since he obviously managed, and he left Newcastle. But just that adoration of the man, he just brilliant. Loved him to bits.
Yeah, absolutely class, man. I think everybody did. Gone, but definitely not forgotten. And as Cesare saying there, he continued to come to St James's Park even after he felt ill after he was sacked. And I know Shepherd, obviously, who's no longer with us either. Shepherd did a lot of good for the club, but I think that was one of the things he got really wrong. I think the whole way that was played out was just dreadful, and I think it turned a lot of people against Newcastle. I think they would never admit it, but I think subconsciously a lot of the hate that was lobbied towards Newcastle as a club, as a fan base, I think was born out of that moment. And I think if you were to ask people, just threw that at them, they'd probably go, actually, do you know what? You're probably right. She was saying that it's amazing to think that he signed James Milner. I remember that. Great eye for a player. I mean, Bella's genius, obviously Milner as well. Jimmy said that should be number one. Yeah, he couldn't believe the club did that. Shit houses, absolutely, man. I couldn't disagree with you on that one, Jimmy. When I tell you what number one is, you might change your mind, though. Especially when Milner is older than Bobby, says says that. Has he got one of them Dorian Gray paintings up somewhere, right? Is he? And Roger saying an honourable man, possible. Nothing more befitting than the word legend, absolutely. And a great comment there for Tommy. Jose was supposed to replace him, but he gave up on the idea because he never thought he'd leave the job. I think when you hear people like Pep and Jose, I mean, they're two of the best managers of their generation, Mark, pupils of Bobby Robson. And you can see bits of Bobby in the way that they are and stuff like that as well, and they know about Newcastle as a city and as a club because of this great man. He used to tell Van Nistelrooy, do it like Shearer. He used to say that to Van Nistelrooy even before he came to Newcastle, So, I mean, Newcastle was in Bobby's heart, mate, wasn't it? I think it always will be, but hopefully he's up there looking down, enjoying what we're doing now. So
he's definitely enjoying this now, isn't he? And I think there's a page out of Bobby's playbook, isn't there, from Eddie Howe, and they're different managers, but they're very similar in sort of styles of man.
It's that classy kind of mentality,
Absolutely.
Isn't it, mate? Yeah,
just feet on the ground, humble. They know what good they've got at Newcastle. They know they've got one of the there'll be an argument from others that say they've got one of the big clubs. They might not be big in terms of recent history, but it's that it is that famous St James's atmosphere. It's the fans. It's the one club city. Everything that goes into it. They know they've got a good thing, and they're humble about it. They know that that's to be protected. And it comes, you look at the comments from Eddie Howe about the whole let the players move closer to London and just train. It's just ridiculous. And can you imagine? Go back to it. Can you imagine any of them having the balls to have said something like that when Bobby was around?
No chance. He would have buried them.
Not a chance. Absolutely right.
People said that as much as he was that way and he was charming and he was, classy and all that. He had that side of him. Shearer said he had that side of him where he could do that.
Yeah.
Ash is totally right. Bobby and Howe, when they speak, you listen. And good shout out from Stu there. Yeah, the statue of Jack Charles was superb, mate. Absolutely superb from Ashington. I thought that was a great touch. We commented it on Twitter as well. Yeah, absolutely brilliant, mate. Chesriston off topic, but this format is such a great idea. So interesting how it's kickstarted my memory of the old days. Thanks for that, mate. Yeah, we might do another one of these again. A little walk down memory lane. So we really appreciate the feedback there. But yeah, sacking Bobby, huge mistake by the club. I don't think we ever recovered really from it. Maybe we obviously have done now, but it took a long time to get the club back to where it needed to be. But from one great manager to another, number 3. Kevin Keegan resigning, Mark, an absolute nightmare at the time. It turned out KK had a bit of a penchant for quitting jobs, really. We didn't realise that back then. But, we'd obviously lost the league the season before, which could have easily made this list. We're going to throw that into this mix anyway. We lost the league.
You've got horror shows. Anfield's probably one, wasn't it?
Well, Anfield's one, yeah. But throwing a 12-point lead away at the top of the league was probably the scariest thing your club will ever do. If we won the league, then God, who knows what we would have done. But obviously that was the season before. Keegan went out and signed Shearer. We thought, fucking, we're going to go at this. About 6 months into the season, Shearer's banging goals in. We're right up there with it, with Manchester United pushing for the title. And out of nowhere, he just quits. Didn't we win 7-0 and he quit? I think. I'm sure it was after the Spurs game.
I think was it Spurs? I'm trying to think
it was.
I think must have been the Spurs. It just it's one of those where it does totally come out of the blue, and it's such it shake the club to the core, isn't it? When you just,
it was like ripping the heart out, wasn't it? At the time, it was like somebody pulled the heart out of your chest.
It was so associated with the style, with the way that Newcastle played. It was all down to Keegan's entertainers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just, I still fail to find the words for it, because it's still, now you look back and you just think, how did that happen? When, why did it happen at that point? I know he sort of lost he'd lost the kind of will to kind of carry on with it when after that game. I'm sure there was a line about it afterwards. He had enough at that point I
think BT's got it in the comments. So it was 7-1 against Spurs. He lost the game, and he felt nothing after smashing them. As BT says, he said he had nothing left to offer Newcastle, and he'd taken them as far as he could. But yeah, absolutely scary. Jimmy agrees with you, mate. A bit of humility goes a long way, Mr. Klopp. Take a look. Absolutely. But I think, Cesare is saying that he loved KK as much as anyone, but I can't fight the criticism that he was a quitter. I thought he quit the England job for the right reason, but not the first time he left us. Yeah, the first time he left us, I think that seemed like if you look back at it now and take your black white blinkers off, Mark, it seemed like a bit of a bottle job, didn't it? When you look at it back then, almost like he bottled it. Whereas the second time he was totally right to quit because they were taking the piss out of him. You know, they weren't signing the players. They were, you know, phantom bids, and it was obviously, you know, the regime that he was working under and everything else. And you know, he didn't want to see them take the piss out of the fans. So I'm totally on board with him leaving the second time round. But the first time round, I don't know.
It's just you just go back. It's such a strange decision. Of when he made the decision, when he went, because it was early January, wasn't it? And
it was.
It's just a bizarre thing to when they've been so good and they were so close to all of a sudden just go.
It's an ego thing though, because didn't he say he didn't like the fact they were taking the club PLC and they were making it a bit more commercialized, and it was a bit of an ego thing that KK might have lost a bit of control, and he just thought, no, I've had enough of this.
Possibly, and there was a massive amount of control that went in. And we've referred to it a few times. Of all the good that he did, he almost sent the club backwards because of the lack of a reserve side. So there was never any opportunity to bring players through because you lost the ability to play against the other team's reserves and stuff. And there was never that option. And in some ways, like I say, for all the good that he did, he harmed the club long term. It was great. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
great for the present, but not for the future, Mark. No, that's what you're trying to say.
Absolutely, you go back and it's a cliche thing to say, but they were everybody's second favourite club to watch because they just played brilliant football. It didn't matter what the score was. You know, it was always that we're going to score one more goal. You can score 7, we'll still win. Yeah. That never say die attitude about it. We don't really care about defending too much because we're just going to score loads of goals. It was great fun to watch.
It was
must have aged quite a few Newcastle fans at that point, I've got to say, because they were dreadful at defending. But it was it's just I come back to that decision just to go. It just you're right. You can't argue that you come across as a quitter because you've walked away from something that was genuinely looked special, and it's just a shock. I mean that whole era just coming to a dead stop.
Absolutely. Chacona Fraser was saying wasn't it to do with selling players? It might have been because Dalglish came in and he had to do a lot of that, didn't he? And I think Dalglish even said shortly afterwards, didn't he, that he was basically told the remit was, listen, all this money's been spent. You're not going to be able to spend all this money, which is why he was having to sell Ferdinand and Ginolas and all these kind of guys, and then bring in his old age pensioner mates that he actually fucking played with some of them, which was the scariest part. But yeah, that kind of doomed the Dalglish era. But Roger's saying as much as he loved KK, with us all, everyone has their own mental health. Presumably, it was getting too messy. But it could have been that back in the 90s. These kind of things weren't talked about as freely and openly as they are now, and maybe KK had the foresight in himself to say, "Listen, this is going to do me in. I've got to go."
And that's fair. I mean, we don't know, do I guess, and I think if that's the case, and there's an element of that, then fair enough. I would completely accept that as an explanation because at the end of the day, you're the most important person. And if it's not right for you at that point, then you have to go and find something that is going to give you purpose and meaning and allow you to function properly. And if you felt that he wasn't able to as a person, then fine. I get that. But it's still just yes. Even now, I mean, we're talking what 25 years later. And it doesn't seem that long.
Doesn't, does it? It can take you right back there. Certainly with my jumper on will take you right back there, man. A bit of a throwback to Keegan here. BT's just thrown up that sentence there we mentioned about the floating on the stock exchange and stuff like that. I don't think KK was keen on that. Jimmy's chucked an interesting one there before we finish with our last top two. Devastated at the time, not sure why. Do you think we were a better side prior to Shearer coming in? I'll just take this one, Mark, if you don't mind. I think that we were a better side, I suppose, when you look at how we played the season before. But Manchester United strengthened, didn't they? They took Andy Carroll off of us. The Cantona came back. They had the young'uns coming through and playing well. So I think at that particular time, the two strikers in world football, my fingers right, two strikers in world football who were the best players in the world was Ronaldo and Alan Shearer. And if you had the chance to sign either one of them, I think if you're chasing the title or you want to be the best of the best in your division, I think you've got to go for one of them. And I think Shearer was just too good an opportunity to pass up. I think that arguably it might have thrown the balance of the side out a little bit more, possibly without having, Les Ferdinand and maybe Beardsley off of them. You basically had two strikers that were very similar, but they still scored 49 goals between them, But it's a real interesting one, Jimmy. It could be something we might have to explore in a bit more detail for
to be fair,
episode, I think.
There's a lot of people who will go either way in that argument, and some will never say that he would have, I'm not going to say ruined Newcastle, but there is a definite argument there to suggest that he, because although he did score a hatful of goals, let's be frank, there's that moment he was never the same that he was at Blackburn. And when you start to throw in the injuries as well.
He did have the injuries, didn't he? He did have the injuries, yeah.
Exactly. And that's a fair cop. But there's just something about that season before when you think how good Newcastle were, even that season before Shearer came in. Did he just upset the balance a little bit?
Maybe. But people said that about Batty. People said that about Tino. It's just, there's so many things that just get thrown in the melting pot. Even the categories. Look, he's up on the table. I think that the main thing is, if we hadn't blown that 12-point lead the season before, we'd have won the league. And then would that have changed the dynamic? Would we sign Shearer? If we signed Shearer, would we have pushed on and won it again? Who knows? Because we might have had the mental edge over Manchester United. But yeah, it's definitely a good one to throw in, Jimmy. Good topic, that, mate. We might have to revisit that, I think, in the World Cup, maybe when we've got a bit of downtime. So we're into our last two of the scary top 10 moments. We've got over an hour here, so it won't be much longer. So number 2 with a bullet mark has got to be this utter sin on Newcastle United's history that, I know we said we watch the swearing and stuff like that because, it's past 10 o'clock, so there's no kids watching. They're all asleep. They've ate too much chocolate tonight. Yeah, they've ate too much chocolate on Halloween. This was the biggest fucking twat thing I've ever seen an owner do in my entire life. We've been talking about the naming rights recently and everything else, but fucking hell, I mean, to take the name of a stadium that's so steeped in culture and like legacy and heritage at St James's Park, and just to plaster, to puke Sports Direct all over it and call it the Sports Direct Arena. Then you had the shit houses on Sky giving it Sports Direct Arena every 2 minutes. We never called it that. Even the away fans didn't call it that, but everybody else did. And it could have been number 1, really, but it's definitely number 2 in my eyes. I mean, tell us whether you agree or disagree in the comments, guys. But what did you think about the time mark? I thought it was disgusting.
It sums up Mike Ashley, doesn't it? I just that whole point, and I get the broadcasters have to call it that because he's named it, and there's a they have to be there and report from there and send their crews and stuff. So they've always got to kind of toe the line to that point. But this brings it round to the present day, doesn't it? And about doing this in the right way. There was no consultation. There was no, well, let's call it the something at St James's Park. It was just the Sports Direct Arena, and then it was added afterwards. But it was only done for one reason. It wasn't done to try and, potentially sell the naming rights to somebody that would bring money into the club. It was done for his benefit only. It wasn't done for the clubs at all, and that's why it hurt. That's why it pissed fans off so much, because it was all done for him, and it's such an awful thing to have done to somewhere that is so steeped in the local traditions of we've said it before. It's that one club city. Everything revolves around St James's Park, and to have done that was just And I get why there's a reluctance for people to accept that maybe you then have it branded as something else now, but then it comes back to you do this in the right way. You get people on board and you do this right with fan consultation, with everybody pulling in the same direction. You use that money to further the club, not the way that he did it.
Absolutely. BT saying they're getting rid of the St James's Park signage outside the ground was just shocking. Roger said it was more than a biggie Chris, but not as big as Sir Bobby Robson for him. Chazway just reminding us of how crap Sports Direct were in terms of their staff and everything else. Yeah, that all came out in the media as well and everything else. And Tommy saying it was one of the worst of his ego trips. And that's a lovely segue to take us into number one with a bullet. So get ready. This is like the scene in The Usual Suspects where he drops the coffee cup and smashes on the floor, and it all comes together that one person is to blame for pretty much most of this list. And he's number one with a bullet. The biggest fright that Newcastle United's had in its modern era. It is Mike Ashley, number one. This horrible, rancid, fat prick of an owner that went from being Willy Wonka to Willy Wanker very quickly. We all thought he was this eccentric billionaire that was going to save us and, take us to heights we'd never been before. And my God, Mark, could anything have gone from being a dream to a nightmare as quickly and as just as ugly as the Mike Ashley era itself?
No, well, that's 2 seasons in, get relegated. I mean, that starts it off, doesn't it? You go from a side that had finished 4th, 3rd, 5th, 7th. Yes, he'd had some down years where he'd finished in the bottom half, but then to have dropped and got relegated and then get relegated again. One top 10 finish or one finish above 10th in his entire time at the club. In that one season under Pardew, couple of top 10 finishes, everything else bottom half or relegation is just. I mean, he came in with all promises. There was the interviews where you say, things were gonna move on. There was that one when he was in with the fans where everybody thought,
I remember that.
He's this eccentric billionaire. He's going to be one of us, or he's as the fans, but he wasn't, and it came quickly, didn't it? That he was only there to further his own interests. He was never interested in taking the club forward at all, despite some of the rhetoric that he'd come out with. His appointments were horrendous, board level, throughout the staff, the managerial hires were appalling. The who's who list of just shockers. Bruce being the end of that.
Oh,
it's 14 odd years of just
mediocrity. Mediocrity is the way I would describe that regime, mate.
And it's funny, you'll always get sort of fans from other clubs where you're in the Premier League for most of it, but come on, just take a step back and take your own club's blinkers off and look at it from the outside and just go, just how bad did that club fall under one man?
Oh, mate.
And the biggest, do you know what the funniest thing about the whole thing is? He sold the club for something like 360 million to
Amanda Staveley,
Amanda Staveley and that. Chelsea went for something like 1.2 billion, and look where Newcastle are in the league now.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And you just think,
Chelsea on the way.
What would you have done if you'd actually invested in the club?
Oh,
if you'd actually done it with some sense, that figure that you got, what could you have actually got? So the funniest thing about the whole thing, and it's shit for 14 years, but the fact that he's probably done himself out of nearly $1 billion.
Yeah. Oh, of course he has.
We can all smile at that.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be this great businessman. Just a couple of comments there. Roger saying, biggest ever blip in our history, fat rancid. Courtney prick Ashley, couldn't agree more, mate. Ashley said he can't think of a single positive thing that he did. He brought Keegan back and hired Shearer as manager that he pissed in their faces. Yeah, exactly. But Keegan resigned and then he binned Shearer off, didn't he? And BT said, I remember fans cheering Ashley when he arrived. Absolutely. We did because, we thought he was going to be, our Abramovich, so to speak. But I mean, just to finish up on the Ashley regime, Mark, I think the perfect way to describe just how we just didn't get it was the season that we finished 5th and they just went out and bought one player. And I think George Colkin said this exact thing on Sky Sports the other day. They were totally ill prepared for Europe the season after and they struggled and they just stayed in the league. And that just goes to show you the guy just did not get it. He saw European football as another way to put more money in the coffers. The ground is falling to pieces. Amanda Staveley, PCP, PIF, they've got to spend all that money fixing this ground up just to get it back to a standard that it should be at for the wonderful fans that go there. I think, as Roger's rightly saying, we attended games, win for Judy. Now, though, it's love and excitement pre-match, during and after, absolutely. But the new owners are going to have to put loads of money in the infrastructure of the club. But you said it right, Mark. Chelsea, Spurs, teams like that, they were down here when Newcastle were up here with Bobby Robson. And when he took over, he just scrimped and they just went up and up and up. And Spurs and that wouldn't be anywhere near where they are now if Newcastle United had been bought by the right owner or if he just invested, as you rightly say.
Yeah, absolutely. You just say it wouldn't have taken much over that span of years. That it wouldn't have taken much, and he would have earned it back in commercial revenue. And this is the other piss take is just how badly he ran the club. Is just how little revenue is coming or commercial revenue is coming into the club, and it's just he wasn't interested really in other. He's interested in furthering his own brand, and that was it. He didn't want anybody else really associate anything that he could do to further his own stuff without then having other people's advertising taken over his own. It just, I mean, I'll give the only thing kind of I got out of it was a cheap season ticket the year you finished 5th.
Well, I think Cesare was saying that the best thing to do was free season tickets.
I was one of those hated ones. That bought their season ticket.
The giveaways, the giveaway tickets. Yeah, it's like remember that scene in Batman with the Joker's firing out money with the old calendars, a bit like that. Cesare saying that the one good thing he did was freeze ticket prices, but then he went on. What did he say? He goes on and becomes the only owner to put his staff on furlough. Absolutely. And Robert's in the comments. Good to see Robert. He's saying, "Hi guys, enjoying this. Waiting for that fucking biggest wank. I think that's going to be, mate. You've missed the K off the end, but we get what you're putting down, mate." And BT saying the new owners want to keep St James Park in the name. We're adding sponsors named after the face, powered by, which is all he had to do. But listen, guys, we've rambled on for an hour and 30 minutes. I've really enjoyed this, Mark, even though it's been scary. Going back down memory lane here, mate. But we thank everybody for the comments. Obviously, that really helps the episode flow. And I didn't say it at the start, but if you haven't already and you're new to the channel tonight, don't worry, it's normally more positive than this. We're just having a scary episode because it's Halloween. So please click that like and subscribe button. Help us get on to that 2,000 subscriber mark. We're really close. I think we're on about 1957 or something like that. So we'd love you to help us get over the line. We're going to be back on Wednesday with an Evermore podcast going through the Villa game and just talking through some of the topics as well. A little bit about some of our players that are on the World Cup radar, some of our improved players over the last few weeks as well. So make sure you tune in for that live at 7 on Wednesday. Then we'll be back with a match preview and review for the Southampton game towards the back end of the week. So it's 11:15. I'm sure it's time for everyone to go to bed. Don't go to bed in a bad mood, Ash. I know you said that in the comments. Just remember how wonderful life is now under Eddie Howe. So that'll make you sleep even better. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Keep supporting that team, McCoy United, and we'll catch you on Wednesday, hopefully.
Take care, guys.
Cheers now. Bye.